Hi, I'm Murianne Hayes. On Christmas Eve, my parents opened the massive front door of our Hillsborough mansion and threw my single suitcase onto the frozen marble steps. My little sister Tara stood right behind them, arms folded, grinning like she'd just won the lottery. "Let's see how you survive now, big sis," she said. I dragged that suitcase through thick, icy fog. No money, no car, nothing left except the long cashmere coat keeping me alive. I collapsed onto a snow-dusted park bench inside our gated neighborhood, shaking so hard my teeth wouldn't stop chattering. That's when she appeared, an old woman, barefoot, skin turning purple, silver hair whipping in the wind. She looked like the cold had already claimed her. Without thinking twice, I stood up, took off my only warm coat and wrapped it around her trembling shoulders. She grabbed my freezing hands, looked straight into my eyes, and whispered, "Kindness like yours is rarer than diamonds." Then she walked away and vanished into the fog. Exactly 1 hour later, 19 black luxury sedans rolled up in perfect silence and blocked the entire street. The same woman stepped out of the middle car. Same face, but now she wore a floor-length camel coat, hair in an elegant chignon, diamonds flashing at her wrist. She walked straight to me, smiled, and said only one sentence. "I've been watching you long enough to know exactly who you really are. If you've ever been thrown away by the people who were supposed to love you most, drop 'been there' or the city you're watching from in the comments. So I know I'm not alone. Trust me, keep watching. What happens next will blow your mind." That afternoon, I was still in shock from the layoff email that landed at 10 a.m., another round of restructuring at the San Francisco ad agency I'd given 6 years to. I packed my desk plant into the passenger seat of my 12-year-old Honda Civic and pointed it south on 101 toward Hillsborough. 32 miles, 47 minutes if traffic was kind. It wasn't. I'd already called Mom from the parking garage. "Just need to crash for a couple weeks while I figure things out," I told her. She sounded distracted, said dinner was at 7, and hung up. When I pulled through the gates, the house looked like a magazine cover, 15-foot noble fir in the 2-story foyer, white orchids everywhere, the caterers in black ties setting the dining table for 20. Dad Richard was uncorking a 2005 Dom Perignon like it was Tuesday. Mom Margaret was fastening a new South Sea pearl choker that definitely wasn't there last month. And Tara, my 27-year-old sister, was twirling in a backless red silk dress, flashing a 6-carat radiant cut diamond on her left hand, like she'd been waiting her whole life for this exact moment. Derek, my ex of 4 years, stood behind her with his arm around her waist. I dropped my keys in the bowl by the door and tried to smile. "Hey everyone, bad day at work." That was all I got out. Tara spun around, eyes wide with fake concern. "Oh my God, again." She gasped loud enough for the caterers to hear. "Third job in 4 years, right?" She turned to Mom. "Remember when she got fired from the startup in Soma for not being a team player?" Mom's lips tightened. Dad didn't even look up from his champagne. I felt my face burn. It was a reduction in force. They let go of the entire creative team. Tara waved her new ring in my direction. "Derek just closed his Series A. 28 million pre-money. Investors love him." Derek gave me that same smug half smile he used when he ended things 2 years ago with, "It's not you. It's timing." Dad finally set his glass down. "Murianne, we need to talk." He didn't motion for me to sit. He never did when it was bad news. He told me straight last month he'd amended the family trust. All of it, 38 million in principal, was now in Tara's name only. Irrevocable. Signed, notarized, filed with the estate attorney in Palo Alto. He said I was 32 capable, and it was time I stood on my own. Mom added, "We can't keep funding a lifestyle that doesn't produce results," as if my salary had ever paid for their orchids or Tara's Birkins. I stood there, mouth open, trying to process that my own parents had just legally disinherited me while I was still standing in their foyer. Tara pulled out her phone, already recording. "This is gold," She laughed. Big sis comes home broke on Christmas Eve. Say something for my followers. I looked at Dad. You're serious? He met my eyes for the first time all night. Cold. Final. You have 20 minutes to pack what you need. Security will let you back in tomorrow for the rest if you make an appointment. Mom wouldn't even look at me. She busied herself adjusting a gold ornament on the tree. I walked upstairs on autopilot. The bedroom I'd had since I was 10 still had my high school swim team photos on the wall. I threw jeans, 2 sweaters, laptop, and toiletries into the old Louis Vuitton weekender Tara hadn't stolen yet. Everything else, books, yearbooks, the framed Stanford diploma, would have to wait. When I came back down, Tara was live on Instagram, narrating like a wildlife documentary. And here comes the prodigal daughter with one sad suitcase. Any bets on how long before she's sleeping in that civic dad opened the front door himself? The fog had rolled in thick. I couldn't see the end of the driveway. Temperature was already dropping below freezing. I stepped over the threshold. Behind me, Tara called out, sweet as poison, Merry Christmas, Murianne. Don't freeze. The door closed with a soft, expensive click. The alarm beeped twice as it armed. And that was it. In under 30 minutes, I went from daughter to trespasser in the only home I'd ever known. I stood on the marble steps in the dark, one suitcase at my feet, wearing the only warm thing I still owned, that long cashmere coat. The second that heavy door sealed behind me, everything went quiet except the blood pounding in my ears. I stood on the empty street trying to breathe, but the air felt like knives. My mind kept replaying Dad's flat voice, 38 million gone with one signature, and Mom refusing to meet my eyes. I was 32 years old, and in one conversation I had become a stranger to the only family I'd ever had. I started walking because standing still felt worse. The wheels on the suitcase rattled over the perfect pavement, the only sound for miles. Every mansion I passed had warm golden windows and laughter spilling out, Christmas trees glowing behind gated driveways. Each one reminded me I no longer belonged anywhere. My fingers were already numb. I kept thinking this can't be real. Any minute Mom would open the door and call me back, say it was a cruel joke. But the alarm stayed armed. No footsteps. Nothing. I don't know how long I walked, maybe 20 minutes, maybe an hour, until I found myself in the little public garden beside the old Episcopal church. There was one iron bench under a street lamp that actually worked. I sat down hard, dropped the suitcase handle, and finally let the tears come. I cried for the little girl who used to hide under that 15-foot tree waiting for Santa. I cried for every birthday where Tara got the bigger present and I was told to be grateful. I cried because I had always believed that if I just worked harder, achieved more, they would finally see me. Turns out none of it mattered. I wasn't disposable because I failed. I was disposable because I wasn't Tara. The tears froze on my cheeks. I hugged my knees to my chest and stared at the ground, trying to figure out how I was going to survive the night, let alone the rest of my life. That was when I heard the slow scrape of bare feet on concrete. I looked up and saw her, an elderly woman, shuffling toward the bench. Silver hair tangled and loose, thin shoulders hunched against the windskin, so pale it looked translucent under the lamp. She stopped a few feet away, swaying slightly, and spoke in a voice rough from cold. Young lady, do you know if any of the shelters still have room tonight? I've been walking up from Burlingame. Everything's full. I wiped my face quickly. I'm sorry. I don't. I don't have anywhere either. She studied me for a long moment, eyes sharp despite the exhaustion. Then she lowered herself onto the bench beside me, leaving a careful distance. We sat in silence while her breathing steadied. I noticed her feet were bare and already past purple, heading toward that scary white that means the damage is deep. Something inside me cracked open. Here was someone who had even less than I did tonight, and she was still polite enough to ask instead of demand. I felt ashamed of my own self-pity. Without saying anything, I stood up, slipped off the only thing keeping me from freezing, and draped it around her shoulders. She looked startled, then closed her eyes as the warmth hit her. Her hands, thin-veined trembling, reached up and pulled the fabric tighter. She turned to me, tears shining in those pale blue eyes. "What's your name, child Murianne?" I answered, voice cracking. She repeated it softly, like she was tasting something precious. "Thank you, Murianne." Then she did something I'll never forget. She took both my icy hands in hers, squeezed once, and held my gaze for a long time. No words, just understanding, passing between two strangers who suddenly weren't strangers anymore. After what felt like forever, she let go, stood up with new steadiness, and gave me the smallest smile. She walked away, slowly swallowed by the night before I could even think to call after her. I sat back down alone, colder than I'd ever been in my life, teeth chattering so hard my jaw hurt. But for the first time since the door closed, the ache in my chest felt different. Lighter. Like giving away the last thing I had somehow gave me something back I didn't know I was missing. The motel room smelled like old cigarettes and cheap pine cleaner. I had been staring at the same Indeed page for hours, applying to anything that paid above minimum wage, when my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Miss Murianne Hayes. The woman's voice was crisp, professional, with a faint East Coast clip. "This is Grace O'Neill calling on behalf of Mrs. Eleanor Calloway. She would like to meet you immediately." I laughed out loud, actually laughed, because it sounded like a prank. "Who is this really?" The line stayed silent for 2 beats. "Mrs. Calloway will explain everything." "A car is waiting outside room 112. I looked through the peephole. 19 identical black BMW 760s lined the cracked parking lot like a presidential motorcade. The lead car's rear door opened by itself. I grabbed my keys and walked out in the same jeans and hoodie I'd worn for 2 days. She was waiting in the middle car, the woman from the bench. Hair now in a flawless, low chignon camel hair coat, cinched at the waist, red-soled heels catching the sun. She looked 78 going on ageless. "Get in, Murianne," she said gently, as if we were old friends. The door closed with a soft thud. The partition rose. We pulled away. 20 minutes later, the gates opened to a 1920s Tudor mansion on a quiet cul-de-sac in Atherton, hidden behind redwoods and a 10-foot hedge. I had driven past this street 1,000 times and never knew it existed. Inside smelled of cedar and roses. A fire crackled in a stone hearth big enough to stand in. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked over a private lake. She motioned for me to sit on a cream sofa that probably cost more than my car. A butler poured tea neither of us touched. "My full name is Eleanor Calloway," she began. "My late husband founded Calloway Commercial Realty. When he passed 12 years ago, I took the company private and turned the profits into the Calloway Family Foundation. We own or finance over 400 million square feet of office and retail space across the country. The foundation distributes roughly $120 million a year." I just stared. My brain couldn't process the numbers. She leaned forward. "Every Christmas Eve for the last 25 years, I do one thing the same. I leave the estate dressed as someone who has nothing. No security visible, no wallet, no phone. I walk until I find someone who still has a heart when they believe no one is watching. Most years I walk all night and go home disappointed. This year I found you." She explained that after I walked away, her security team, plainclothes parked 2 blocks over, had kept eyes on me from a distance for 48 hours. They watched me check into the motel with cash eat vending machine food applied to 50 jobs in one sitting cry in the shower, and never once try to find out who the homeless woman was or brag about the good deed. "You're the first person in 15 years, she said quietly, who gave away the last thing keeping them alive without expecting anything back. I need to know if that was a fluke or who you really are." She stood and walked to the window, hands clasped behind her back. I have no children, no heirs. When I'm gone, strangers on a board will decide where my money goes. I don't want that. I want someone who understands what it feels like to be thrown away on Christmas Eve, to decide how we help the next person who gets thrown away. She turned to face me. I'm offering you a room here, a salary and a 5-year apprenticeship. If at the end, you're the person I believe you are, the foundation becomes yours to run. Not a gift. A responsibility. I opened my mouth closed. It opened it again. Why me was all I managed. Because she said, eyes suddenly fierce, I know exactly what it feels like to sit on a freezing bench with nowhere to go and still choose kindness. I was 29 when my own father did it to me. I promised myself if I ever got the chance, I'd make sure no one who chose right in that moment stayed lost. She extended her hand. So Murianne Hayes, will you come home with me? I moved into the East Wing the following Monday. My new bedroom was bigger than my parents' entire downstairs, with French doors opening onto a rose garden I could actually smell from bed. Grace O'Neill, tall, silver-haired, zero-nonsense, handed me a leather binder the thickness of a phone book and said, "Welcome to boot camp." The first month was brutal. 6 a.m. runs around the lake with Eleanor's former Navy SEAL trainer. 7:30 breakfast meetings where I learned to read a 909 DPF tax return faster than most CPAs. 9 a.m. to 6 p.m., sitting beside Eleanor in board meetings at the Foundation's offices on Sand Hill Road, taking notes while billionaires argued over impact metrics. Evenings were spent dissecting 20 years of grant archives until my eyes burned. Eleanor didn't want another rich kid playing philanthropist. She wanted someone who could turn dollars into changed lives without wasting a cent. Her favorite line became, "We don't give fish. We don't even give fishing lessons. We buy the whole damn river and make sure everyone can eat forever." She enrolled me in Stanford Graduate School of Business's executive program for nonprofit leaders. Full tuition covered, no questions asked. 3 nights a week I drove the 5 miles to campus, sat in classrooms with executives twice my age, and learned how to measure outcomes instead of intentions. Weekends meant site visits, battered women's shelters in East Oakland, after-school programs in East San Jose, veteran housing projects in the Central Valley. I interviewed mothers who had escaped abuse with nothing but their kids and a garbage bag of clothes. I listened to teenagers explain how one safe place to do homework kept them from joining gangs. Every story carved itself into me. Back at the estate, Grace drilled me on governance. How to handle a rogue board member. How to say no to a senator's pet project without losing federal matching funds. How to fire a grantee caught embezzling without triggering a PR nightmare. I rewrote the entire grant application process from scratch: shorter forms, faster decisions, mandatory site visits within 30 days of approval. Eleanor read every draft and bled red ink all over them, then made me defend each change in front of the full board. There were nights I fell asleep at the kitchen island with my face on a spreadsheet. There were mornings I cried in the shower because I felt like an imposter who would never be good enough. But every time I wanted to quit, I remembered sitting on that freezing bench with nothing, and I kept going. June arrived hot and sudden. One Thursday morning, Eleanor texted library. Now. I walked in expecting another 12-hour strategy session. Instead, she was alone, sunlight pouring through stained glass windows, holding a single folder. She didn't sit. She slid the folder across the mahogany table and stayed standing. Inside was an employment agreement on heavy creamstock. Title: President and Chief Executive Officer, Callaway Family Foundation. Reporting line directly to the board, meaning her, until she decided otherwise. Base salary, $195,000. 3% equity in the foundation's endowment, currently valued at just under $4 billion. Full decision-making authority over all programs starting year 3, subject only to fiduciary duty. I looked up, speechless. She finally sat, folding her hands like she was praying. I didn't bring you here because you gave away a coat, she said. Anyone can be generous for 5 minutes when a camera might be watching. I watched you for 5 straight months. I watched you fight for a domestic violence shelter that every banker in the room wanted to defund because the numbers looked messy. I watched you sit on a folding chair in Oakland until midnight, listening to a 17-year-old girl explain why she couldn't go home. I watched you rewrite a 70-page policy manual because one paragraph would have left transgender kids without beds. Her voice cracked just once. You have the mind I need and the heart I lost a long time ago. The foundation is yours to run. I'll stay on the board to keep the old men in line, but day to day the river belongs to you now. I tried to say thank you, but nothing came out. She waved it off. Sign it before I change my mind and make you finish the endowment tax module first. I laughed through tears and signed. That night we opened a 1982 Chateau Margaux on the terrace. Just the two of us watching the sun drop behind the redwoods. She raised her glass. To the girl who had every reason to become bitter and chose kindness anyway. I clinked mine against hers. And to the woman who refused to let one good deed stay invisible. We drank. For the first time since Christmas Eve, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. October smelled like wet leaves and money in San Francisco. I was in my corner office on the 22nd floor of 300 California Street, reviewing final numbers for the second home campus, when Grace knocked once and opened the door. Your sister and Derek Whitaker are downstairs. No appointment. I felt my stomach drop the way it used to when Tara borrowed my clothes in high school and returned them ruined. I told security to send them up. They walked in looking like they'd rehearsed the performance on the elevator ride. Tara wore a modest navy sheath dress instead of her usual bodycon hair in a low ponytail, minimal jewelry. Derek had traded the hoodie and sneakers founder uniform for a navy suit that almost fit. Both carried the tight smiles of people who had practiced apologies in the mirror. Tara spoke first, voice, soft, eyes shiny. Murianne. I've been awful. We've been awful. I'm so sorry for everything. For Christmas Eve, for the things I posted. All of it. Derek nodded vigorously. We're getting married next spring, trying to do things the right way this time. I stayed behind my desk, hands folded, and waited. Tara took a breath. Dad's in trouble. Some investments went south. He and Mom might lose the house. And Derek's new company, AI for Elderly Care, just needs $2 million to close the seed round. We wouldn't ask if it wasn't life or death. I raised an eyebrow. Which part is life or death, Dad's mortgage or your valuation? Derek forced a chuckle. Look, I get it. You're big time now. But blood is blood, right? $2 million is nothing to the foundation. I leaned back. Tell me what happened to the $38 million trust fund you took last December. Tara's Maskey blinked. We diversified. Crypto NFTs, a few angel deals Derek's friends were running. It was supposed to 10x. Then FTX collapsed. Luna went to zero and most of it's gone. Derek jumped in. Market downturn. Happens to everyone. Sequoia lost billions too. We just need a bridge. I opened the folder Grace had quietly placed on my desk, screenshots, bank records, a Forbes article titled Hayes Family Heiress Blows Inheritance on Memecoins. I turned the folder around so they could see. 87% gone in 11 months, I said calmly. You bought a Lambo, each put a deposit on a condo in Miami, and paid influencers to promote shitcoins. That's not a downturn. That's arson. Tara's mask slipped. You're seriously going to sit there in your fancy office and let Mom and Dad go homeless? I pressed the intercom. Security to 22, please. Derek tried sweet reason. Come on, Murianne. $2 million is petty cash here. You'll never even miss it. The door opened. 2 guards in suits stepped in. I stood. This foundation exists for people who never had a safety net, not for people who lit theirs on fire and now want mine. You're not getting a dime, not today, not ever. Tara went scarlet. You ungrateful bitch. She was already pulling out her phone, hitting record as the guards took her elbows. By the time they reached the lobby, 3 paparazzi vans and a local gossip blogger were waiting outside the glass doors. Someone had tipped them off. Tara went full performance tears, trembling lip shouting about cold-hearted sister abandoning her own blood. The video hit TikTok within 20 minutes. Caption: My billionaire sister won't even help our parents keep their house. Family first, sarc toxic sibling. It blew up. 10 million views in 6 hours. Then the internet did what the internet does best. Old classmates posted yearbook photos of Tara pouring yogurt on my backpack senior year. Someone found the Instagram live from Christmas Eve where she laughed while I carried out my suitcase. A former nanny went on record about the way Tara used to lock me out of the house in the rain as a joke. The comments flipped from sympathy to pitchforks. Hayes family exposed trended higher than the original video. Derek's seed round deck leaked. Someone at the foundation accidentally forwarded it to a journalist. Turns out the AI elderly care startup was 90% vaporware and 10% his cousin's garage project. Investors ghosted. Tara's wedding planner canceled. She hadn't paid the deposit. Their engagement announcement post got ratioed into oblivion. I never posted a single word. By midnight, the video was age-restricted for bullying. The blogger issued a groveling apology, and Tara's follower count had dropped by half. Grace poured me a finger of scotch when I got back to Atherton that night. Poetic justice tastes better when you don't have to lift a finger, she said. I raised the glass to the dark window. No, I answered. It tastes like closure. November brought cold fog that never quite lifted. The news broke on a Tuesday. Pacific Crest Capital collapses. $4.2 billion Ponzi scheme unravels. Dad had moved every remaining dollar mortgage refinance home equity line, even mom's jewelry, into the fund 6 months earlier because the guaranteed 18% annual return would get us back on track. The FBI raided the offices in Newport Beach the same week. The founder was already on a yacht somewhere off Cabo. 30 days later, the foreclosure notice appeared on the Hillsborough mansion's front door. No bidders showed up at the auction. The bank took title. Richard, Margaret, and Tara moved into a 2-bedroom apartment above a nail salon on Story Road in East San Jose, rent $2,900 a month, all they could afford after the bankruptcy filing. Tara's credit cards were maxed at $247,000, mostly on handbags and retail coping after the October disaster. Collection agencies called non-stop. They showed up at the foundation without an appointment on a rainy Thursday morning. Security called up. I told them to let the 3 of them in. Dad looked 20 years older. Hair gone completely white, shoulders curved inward, wearing a sport coat 2 sizes too big. Mom had cut her hair short and dyed it a cheap drugstore brown that didn't quite match. Tara wore no makeup, eyes, puffy, clutching a knockoff tote like a life raft. I met them in the small glass conference room on 22. No water, no coffee. Grace stood outside the door. Dad spoke first voice, cracking on every word. Murianne, you're my daughter. I know we hurt you. I know we don't deserve anything, but we have nowhere else to turn. The apartment lease ends in 6 weeks. We're going to be on the street. Mom stared at the table, twisting a tissue into shreds. Tara finally looked up, eyes red. Please. Just enough to get us a fresh start. We'll sign anything. We'll never ask again. I opened a slim black folder and laid 3 business cards on the polished wood. First card, Marcus Chen, certified financial planner, specializing in post-bankruptcy recovery. Second card, Financial Literacy and Debt Management Program, free 8-week course, funded by the foundation held at the East San Jose Community Center. Third card, National Alliance on Mental Illness California Crisis Hotline, and a local therapist who took sliding scale clients. I pushed the cards toward them. This is what the Callaway Foundation can do for strangers who lost everything through no fault of their own, I said, voice level. It's the same help we offer anyone who walks in here broke and scared. Dad's hand shook as he reached for the cards, then stopped halfway. That's it. After 32 years, that's all you have for your own father. I stood. You had choices. You chose to rewrite the trust. You chose to chase returns that sounded too good to be true. You chose to stay silent when Tara humiliated me for sport. Those were your decisions, not mine. Mom finally looked at me, tears streaming. We were wrong. We're so sorry. I met her eyes for the first time in almost 2 years. I believe you're sorry now, I said. But sorry doesn't rebuild a life. Work does. Courage does. Taking responsibility does. Tara started sobbing loud and messy. You're enjoying this. You want us to suffer. I walked to the door and held it open. No, I answered. I just refuse to pay for your suffering anymore. Security escorted them out. Dad never looked back. Mom whispered, I'm sorry one last time as the elevator doors closed. Tara kept crying until they reached the lobby. Grace handed me a tissue I didn't realize I needed. They'll be okay, she said quietly. People who hit bottom either stay there or start climbing. You just gave them the only ladder we're allowed to give. I nodded, watching the rain streak down the windows. For the first time, the ache in my chest was gone, not replaced by joy, just by space. Room to breathe. The sky over East Palo Alto was the color of steel on opening day. Second home rose like a promise, kept 4 stories of glass and redwood wrapped around a courtyard where kids were already chasing each other between planter boxes full of rosemary and kale. 3,000 people filled the plaza, families who would live here, donors, city council members, every major network, even the governor cutting the ribbon. I stood backstage in a simple black suit, heart hammering louder than the marching band warming up. Grace squeezed my hand once. Eleanor, elegant in winter white, gave me the smallest nod from the front row. This was the project I had bled for: 200 permanent supportive apartments, on-site medical clinic, job training center, preschool, rooftop farm, and a policy that no one would ever be turned away for lack of paperwork. The mayor finished his speech. The crowd roared when my name was called. I walked to the podium. The microphone felt heavier than any trust document I had ever signed. I looked out over the sea of faces. Near the back, almost hidden behind a column, stood Richard, Margaret, and Tara. Dad wore an old navy pea coat that hung loose on his frame. Mom clutched a paper cup of coffee like it might disappear. Tara had cut her hair short and looked strangely small without the armor of designer labels. I let the silence settle for 3 full seconds. 1 year ago tonight, I began, voice steady. I was thrown out of the only home I'd ever known with 1 suitcase and no place to go. I learned that night what it feels like when the people who are supposed to catch you drop you instead. A ripple moved through the crowd. Cameras zoomed. I also learned something else on a freezing park bench. Real family isn't DNA. Real family is the stranger who chooses to see you when you're invisible. Real family is the hand that reaches when you have nothing left to give in return. I turned and gestured to the building behind me. This is second home. 200 families will never again have to sleep in their cars because a landlord raised the rent. Kids will never again do homework in the back seat because the lights got shut off. And every single person who walks through those doors will be told the same thing I needed to hear that Christmas Eve. You are not disposable. You are not alone. You are home. The applause started slow, then exploded. People stood. Phones rose like a wave of light. I waited for it to crest, then spoke again, softer, so every microphone strained to catch it. Tonight, we open these doors for every person who has ever been told they don't belong, especially for those who were told it by the people who were supposed to love them most. I looked straight across the plaza, directly at the 3 figures in the back. Dad's shoulders shook. Mom covered her mouth. Tara stared at the ground. I didn't smile. I didn't scowl. I simply held their gaze for one heartbeat longer than comfort allowed. Then I stepped away from the podium. The governor cut the ribbon. The marching band struck up. Children rushed forward with flowers. Reporters shouted questions I pretended not to hear. I walked down the steps through the crowd that parted like water and headed for the main entrance. Richard tried to step forward. Muriel and I kept walking, not fast, not slow, just forward. Mom reached out a hand that never touched me. Tara opened her mouth, closed it, and for the first time in her life said nothing at all. I passed within 2 feet of them without breaking stride. The massive redwood doors of second home opened automatically as I approached. Warm light spilled out onto the concrete. I crossed the threshold. The doors closed behind me with a soft final sound. I never looked back. Not because I hated them. Not because I needed to prove anything, but because I finally understood forgiveness doesn't mean reopening the door that hurt you. Sometimes it simply means walking through a new one and letting the old one stay shut. Inside, a little boy in a Spider-Man jacket tugged my sleeve. "Are you the lady who built this place?" he asked. I knelt so we were eye to eye. "I'm one of them," I said. He offered me a dandelion he'd picked from the courtyard. "For you, because you gave us a home." I took the flower, and for the first time in a long time, I smiled like I meant it. Outside, the celebration continued. Inside second home, the future began.